I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Tibetan. 我上也知当所起척남라 장주바두达尼 캡수지 라키 진소기 베스남기 졸라 벤치 상계 주파쇼. Once more in English. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And I'll say a short prayer of my own. Okay, so today we are on the last point of the 7 points of mind training. We're using Trungpa Rinpoche's Training the Mind in Loving Kindness and Compassion. This 7th point is the guidelines of mind training. And Trungpa sums them up by saying the guidelines of mind training have to do with how to proceed further in our everyday life. This topic seems to be connected with a general realization of how we can conduct ourselves properly in our relationships and in general post-meditation experience. And the first slogan here is number 39. All activities should be done with one intention. And a lot of these are very short. So I'm not, I think, always going to read what he says, his commentary. So all activities should be done with one intention. The one intention is to have a sense of gentleness towards others and a willingness to be helpful to others, always. That seems to be the essence of the Bodhisattva vow. In whatever you do, sitting, walking, eating, drinking, even sleeping, you should always take the attitude of being of benefit to all sentient beings. And I want to clarify right at the start with these slogans, the difference between intention and action, and connect that back to aspiration bodhicitta and action bodhicitta. When we say that this one intention is to have a sense of gentleness towards others and a willingness to be helpful to others always, that may translate into us actively helping others. But I think we also need to be aware that sometimes we have to help ourselves in order to be able to help others or to further that bigger aspiration to benefit all sentient beings and that aspiration to be helpful to others. And we need to be able to develop the discernment to balance the aspiration and the intention in the moment. I think it's common for us to get fixated, for many of us to get fixated on one or the other of those things, whether it is the aspiration, this big, monumental, infinite task, or the immediate action. And balance is really the goal. And in order to balance, we need to know what we're balancing. So having some clarity about both of those aspects of our intention is really important. The intention is the broad guiding principle, and then in the moment we make a choice to act, hopefully mindfully, and connect that to the broader intention. And that discernment is really important. And lack of that discernment is often a cause of suffering. I'm thinking in particular about ways that we push ourselves, knowingly or not, outside of our window, and then pay the price. You know, whether it is in physical health or mental health, or trying to help someone when it's really maybe not the wisest thing. Maybe they don't want our help, or it's not the right situation. So it is really important to always have handle on both of those two aspects, the broad and the precise. Um, I wrote down, I was going to tell an anecdote. I don't know if it actually relates now that I'm here, but so we have a beach near me on the North Shore of Ohio. And I got there the other day and I saw something I'd never seen before, which is a pickup truck full of people with megaphones and giant flags jumping out of the truck. And immediately I was like, oh, I don't know what these people have to say to the whole beach, but I hope it's good. And it was a group of I can't remember the name of the church. It's somewhat radical. What's the word I'm looking for? Like antagonistic Christian group. And so they're on the beach, which is a beautiful place to just listen to the waves and hear the wind. And they're talking through the bullhorn. And like I wanted to do something, you know. And I didn't. I started walking towards them, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I tried to kind of say some mantra and center myself a little bit. I was like, I'll figure it out when I get there. And what I ended up doing was the guy who was talking on the bullhorn. I walked up to him and I talked to him the whole way down the beach, so he wasn't on the megaphone. And I bought all those people that he passed some quiet. And it wasn't an antagonistic conversation. I mean, I think he would wanted it to be a little antagonistic with me, but I was just kind of saying like, tell me what what you're here to say. I'm here to listen to you. Like let me know. Let's talk. And it worked for one pass of the beach, but then the other people in this group were like, don't worry about him. Get on the bullhorn. So but in that moment, like I was trying to think, how can I help everyone here, or at least try, with an intention to benefit beings. And what's an action I can do right now that's not necessarily confronting, but validating, is what I was shooting for. So I don't know if that does relate totally to this, but it is a little bit, I guess. So another quote from this section I just want to say before we move on. Trungpa says, whatever you are doing, you should always take the attitude of being a benefit to all sentient beings. And then we move on to number 40. Number 40, Trungpa says, well, the slogan is correct all wrongs with one intention. And I think this one's pretty radical in some good ways. He says, when you're in the midst of perverse circumstances such as intense sickness, a bad reputation, court cases, economic or domestic crisis, increase of kleshas, or resistance to practice, you should develop compassion for all sentient beings who also suffer like this. And you should aspire to take on their suffering yourself through the practice of Lojong. We need to correct or to overcome all the wrongs or bad circumstances that we experience. Instead of having a negative attitude towards practice and not wanting to practice any longer, whenever such perversions and problems occur, they should be overcome. In other words, if your practice becomes good when things are good for you, but becomes non-existent when the situation is bad, that is not the way. Instead, whether situations are good or bad, you continue to practice. To correct all wrongs means to stamp on the kleshas. Whenever you don't want to practice, stamp on that and then practice. Whenever any bad circumstance comes up that might put you off, stamp on it. In this slogan, you are deliberately, immediately, and very abruptly suppressing the kleshas. So think about this power of this statement. He's literally saying we can correct whatever we perceive as wrong with an intention. Correct all wrongs with one intention. I know I get so fixated on what can I do? What can I do to change this or make this right or better? And that stuff's important. But the message here is one intention is at least where it's got to start. So generating compassion for all people suffering, whatever it is that you're suffering from, is also a really healthy magic trick to generate compassion for yourself. And that's where the 3 seeds practice that we've covered in previous sessions. May this anger that I'm experiencing contain the anger of all sentient beings. Am I working through this moment of anger? May I and all beings be free of it. so that we can achieve perfect enlightenment, which is freedom from anger. That aspiration, that intention, is a really great, I think it's judo. Is that the one where you turn somebody's energy against them? I just think that's a really important practice to remember, because whenever we're feeling an upheaval of some kind of negative emotion, whether it's negative like anger or negative like fixation, we can turn to that aspiration and recognize that we're not alone in feeling that. A whole lot of other people feel that too, and we want to help them. And in that way, we can maybe be a little more present with it and turn what might be a cascade or a snowball of selfishness into the opposite. Turn it into something very altruistic and caring for others. So whether situations are good or bad, he said, you continue to practice. And I want to mention here that word practice. There's a lot of things that we hear a lot in meditation circles, in Buddhist circles, and they kind of just become like not white noise, but we maybe don't even really think about what we're hearing. That word practice is really important. I mean, I think it's interesting that there are a number of professions that use the term practice, and there are a number of professions that don't. And I think it's funny that like doctors practice. Like, don't you want them to be like done and doing a great job when they see you? Like, but they're practicing. There's an admission that they're working at getting better, and it's an iterative process. It keeps going on, and there's a recognition that it's never really done. And similarly, like as a musician, practice is important to me, but when I'm performing, I still have to balance that a little bit, because if I don't do what I practiced, which may not be the best yet, the performance may not be quite as good, but I'm also not taking the risk of growing with what I've practiced before. So I just want to highlight this idea of, because he said whether situations are good or bad, you continue to practice. And really the distinction I'm trying to make here is, when you hear practice, I don't want you to think sitting down with Tibetan text in front of you, doing a thing that someone told you should do every day. I don't think that is what practice in the big picture means. I think that's an integral part of practice. But whether situations are good or bad, you continue to practice. I think we need to come down to just the very basics of things. Like sometimes practice is just examining our minds. Sometimes it's just putting attention on a sensation in our body. Sometimes a practice is just trying to be open to somebody, or validating to somebody that's nearby. All of these are kinds of practice, and there are so many varieties of practice. And so I just wanted to make sure, because so much of this teaching can come off as like a prescription of what you do all the time. I want you to know that if there is an all the time, that all the time has so much variety in it. And really, like, part of our practice is to be able to learn all the nuances of it and to be able to find the actions that match our intention. And he also says that we deliberately, immediately, and abruptly suppress the kleshas. And I just want to clarify this word suppress here. I had to do some research into this, because we're not talking about repressing. The word here in Tibetan is gopa, which means to stop, halt, or arrest. So it's probably meant, when he says suppress, to convey stopping a thought from spilling over into action. Therefore, it's reducing its karmic impact, because things sort of originate in the mind, and then we act on them outside and in the world or not. There is some karmic imprint from things that we think, but if we can catch them before they leak out into the world around us, that's beneficial. So when we talk about suppressing, or stamping is the other word he used, like, we're talking about like kind of halting them before they get bigger and their negative impact expands. And then number 41 is 2 activities, one at the beginning and one at the end. He says, the point of the slogan is to begin and end each day with twofold bodhicitta. In the morning, you should remember bodhicitta and take the attitude of not separating yourself from it. And at the end of the day, you should examine what you have done. If you have not separated yourself from twofold bodhicitta, that's aspiration and action bodhicitta. If you have not separated yourself from twofold bodhicitta, you should be delighted and vow to take the same attitude again the next day. And if you were separated from bodhicitta, you should vow to reconnect with it the next day. This slogan is a very simple one. It means that your life is sandwiched by your vow to put others before yourself and by your sense of commitment to twofold bodhicitta. When you get up in the morning, as soon as you wake up, to start off your day, you promise yourself that you will work on twofold bodhicitta and develop a sense of gentleness towards yourself and others. You promise not to blame the world and other sentient beings and to take their pain on yourself. When you go to bed, you do the same thing. And that way your sleep and the day that follows are influenced by that commitment. It is quite straightforward. So twofold bodhicitta refers to that action, what we're doing, and aspiration, what is the guiding intention. And that relates to the practice we started with. You know, the three-step practice that I share as the basis of what we do in my nonprofit, Mindfulness for Life, is this. It's really connecting in the moment with our situation, what it is right now, and then making a choice about our action based on our intention. And there's a ton of research that connecting with your broader sense of purpose increases your sense of well-being. So if your broader sense of purpose is to help other beings awaken, the more often you can remember that, the better you're going to feel. And that's probably also going to make you more able to do actions, direct actions to help people. So he says, you promise not to blame the world and other sentient beings. And I just wanted to point out here that another mindful practice that we can all engage in is to simply notice all of our subtle and gross tendencies towards assigning blame in the world. I've joked about this before, but I think it's really funny when I kick a piece of furniture by accident or stub my toe on something. There's always a moment where I didn't used to know this, but once I started looking at it, there's a moment where I'm trying to figure out a way to blame the inanimate object. You know, I want to blame it, but I have to realize at some point, oh no, it's just me. I kicked that. So yeah, that is a great practice though, to just notice those tendencies, because if we're not noticing them, we can't halt them, you know? So the noticing is so important. And that's another theme that's come up throughout this book in this teaching I've been giving, is we don't want to stamp out awareness. That would be such a big mistake. We have to, and part of the reason why compassion goes along with that awareness or curiosity is we're going to notice things that we don't like, you know, or we don't think are the best qualities. That's just part of the practice, and that's when we need the compassion. So it is so important that we're not stamping out our awareness of our inner world, of our tendencies, of our worst tendencies, really. One of the slogans we did last time was work with the biggest defilements first. So the stuff we don't want to see, it may take some time, it may take some compassion, it may take being aware of when the right time to examine it is, but it all needs to be examined. We don't want to stamp or suppress that. And that's really important distinction. Next is number 42, whichever of the two occurs, be patient. Trungpa says, whether a joyful or painful situation occurs, whatever happens to you, your practice is not swayed by it, but you maintain continual patience and continual practice. Whether you are in the midst of extreme happiness or extreme suffering, you should be patient. You should regard extreme suffering as the result of previous karma. Therefore, there is no need to feel remorseful. Instead, you should simply try to purify any evil deeds and obscurations. Extreme happiness is also the result of previous karma, so there is no reason to indulge in it. You should donate any riches to virtuous causes, and your sense of personal authenticity and power should be resolved into virtue. And I'm just going to share personally, there are things about this that worry me a little bit. And it has a lot to do with the phrases that we sometimes hear, like what you resist persists, things like that. all those things that all land in the just push on through category. I don't think that's an awakened view of things. I don't think that is a process view. I don't think that is a practice. The practice means sometimes recognizing that maybe the suffering that you're going through, it may not be just your fault. You may need to remove yourself from a situation. Sometimes staying in a situation, it becomes your fault because you're not leaving a situation. So I think being aware, being in practice in every moment, tuning into where we are, trying to make a choice that aligns with the bigger goal is so important. And I just always have to push back a little bit because, as I think I've said in this venue before, I don't think Buddhism is trauma informed, and I'd like to help it move in that direction. I think Dharma is inherently trauma informed for sure. But I think Buddhism ends up falling into the realm sometimes of metaphysical claims and of statements of like, this is what you always do or never do that. And that's just what religion does. It doesn't mean it's inherently bad. It's super helpful to so many of us, but we need to be aware that there's a distinction there. And when you hear things like that which resists persists, you should be a little skeptical. I mean, that is not an alive kind of statement of practice. Next, we have observe these two, even at the risk of your life. Trungpa says, you should maintain the disciplines you have committed yourself to. In particular, 1, the refuge vow, and 2, the bodhisattva vow. You should maintain the general livelihood of being a decent Buddhist, and beyond that, the special discipline of the practice of Lojong, or mind training. This practice should become a very important part of your life. For tantric practitioners, this slogan means that in this life and in any future lives, you should keep the 3 jhana discipline. This applies to dharmic principles in general and to the practice of Lojong in particular. You should always keep that bond or samaya, even at the risk of your life. Number 44, train in the 3 difficulties. Trungpa says, the 3 difficulties have to do with how we relate to our kleshas or neuroses. The first difficulty is to realize the point at which you are tricked by your own emotions or kleshas. You must look and understand that trick, which is very difficult. The second difficulty is to dispel or to exercise our emotionalism. And the third difficulty is to cut the continuity of that emotionalism. In other words, in the beginning, it is very hard to recognize your neuroses. Then it is very difficult to overcome them. And thirdly, it is very difficult to cut through them. Those are the 3 difficulties. When neurosis arises, you first have to recognize it as neurosis. Then you have to apply a technique or antidote to overcome it. Since neurosis basically comes from selfishness, placing too much importance on yourself, the antidote is that you have to cut through your ego. Finally, you have to have the determination not to follow the neurosis or continue to be attracted to it. There is a sense of abruptly overcoming neurosis. Altogether, we have 6 categories. The difficulties are: first, it is difficult to recognize our kleshas. Second, it is difficult to overcome them. Third, it is difficult to cut through them. What you should do is first, recognize them. Second, try to overcome them. Third, take a vow never to create such things. It is very difficult to relate with the bodhisattva principle, or for that matter, any monumental concept. Therefore, this slogan says, train in the 3 difficulties. But if you are willing to practice Lojong, your mind will be completely trained and indoctrinated into the bodhisattva's way of thinking. In fact, Lojong literally means indoctrination. Lo meaning intelligence, and Zhong meaning cleaning up or training. The idea is to indoctrinate yourself so that you cannot get away from that monolithic principle called Buddha nature, bodhicitta tathagata garbha. I have to admit, I would prefer the term inoculation from indoctrination, but I think we get the point. And there's I think a lot in common here in this train in the 3 difficulties with the previous 2 activities, one at the beginning, one at the end slogan, because what's kind of what we're talking about here. Like we have to notice these upheavals. Then when we notice them, we have to apply an antidote, and that means the right one. So for instance, if our neurosis is coming from a place of hyperfixation, of being tight, which like one of the ways that Trungpa refers to anger is intellectual fixation. So if we're really fixated on an idea, like we're right, and I know it's right, and it's causing this upwelling, then we know that the antidote probably needs to be something a little less fixated, a little more spacious. That's the balancing factor. So I think that, again, like knowing the situation, the first part is just paying attention, and a lot of times catching things that we're not happy to catch. But then with that information, we have to apply an antidote that makes sense, put the practice into place that counterbalances whatever the negative imbalance we're experiencing is. And then the last step is really aspirational. That's like, we need to keep making these aspirations that we're going to do this. It's going to work. We're going to keep it up. So that is number 44. Number 45 is take on the three principal causes. Trungpa says cause refers to that which causes you to be a good dharmic person or bodhisattva. The first cause is having a good teacher. The second cause is applying your mind and basic demeanor to the Dharma. The third cause is having food and housing so that it is possible for you to practice the Dharma. You should try to maintain those three situations and take delight that you have such opportunities. To take on the first principal cause is to realize the necessity of a teacher who actually allows you to get into situations. To take on the second principal cause is to realize that one's mind should be tamed. And to take on the third principal cause is to realize that it is possible for you to practice the Dharma because of having the right circumstances, because you have been taking an open attitude towards your life and have already worked out some kind of livelihood. Your food and clothes and shelter are taken care of, and economically you can afford to practice. So you should take on and practice these three causes. 46, pay heed to that. Pay heed that the three never wane. The first thing you should not let wane is devotion to your spiritual friend. Your mental attitude of admiration, dedication, and gratefulness towards the spiritual friend should not diminish. The second thing you should not let wane is delightful attitude toward Lojong, or the taming of your mind. Your appreciation for receiving such teachings as Lojong or mind training should not diminish. And the third thing you should not let wane is your conduct, the Hinayana and Mahayana vows that you have taken. Your practice of the Hinayana and Mahayana disciplines should not diminish. This slogan is straight and low-key. At this point in practicing Mahayana, it is very necessary for us to pick up some basic strength. We are not just careless, carefree people, but our attitude is one of having basic strength, basic energy. And then 47, keep the three inseparable. Your practice of Lojong should be wholehearted and complete. In body, in speech, and in mind. You should be inseparable from Lojong. And a contemplation I would encourage for you to try at some point is thinking of some of the ways that we can keep the three inseparable. How do we keep Lojong inseparable from mind is maybe what we've been talking about a lot, but how we keep Lojong inseparable from speech is maybe a related but different topic. How do we keep Lojong inseparable from body? So this is these are questions that, I mean, if we had more time, we could have a conversation about it, but ultimately you will find the answers for yourself on this. And some of them may be in common with other people here, but some of them may not, and you're the best person to answer that question. Number 48, train without bias in all areas. It is crucial always to do this pervasively and wholeheartedly. The practice of Lojong includes everyone and everything. It is important to be thorough and impartial in your practice, excluding nothing at all that comes up in your experience. Excluding nothing. So hearing that, can you find the apparent boundary of your compassion? Excluding nothing. What do you want to exclude? Right? Like, I think we all have something that there's a little inkling of like that too. That's a good way to figure out where the edge of our compassion is, where the working boundary is that we're trying to push. What or who feels like it could be excluded, or what reasons make us seem like we have a rationale to exclude. Not a good idea to exclude, but we should know where those boundaries are. And last, is it possible that you found or did not find yourself outside of that boundary? Were you out there and you didn't notice, or are you out there and you do notice? That's another important question. Exclude nothing. Number 49, always meditate on whatever provokes resentment. Always meditate on that which is most difficult. If you do not start right away, the moment difficulty arises, it's very hard to overcome. And I want to jump back here to the imagery of monkeys and pedestals. So just a quick recap. There's a guy, I think he worked for Google, some innovation lab, and he had this analogy about if you had this great idea about making money by training a monkey to juggle fire while it stands on a pedestal. What do you do to make that happen? You kind of need to do two things. You need to find a pedestal or build a pedestal and train a monkey to juggle fire. And most of us would start on the pedestal and probably spend a lot of time on the pedestal and keep putting off training the monkey because that's a much harder job, and that's why when we hear things like start with the greatest defilements, and this one, always meditate on whatever provokes resentment. We got to start with those big things. And the good news is they're easy to catch. They're the big ones. They're a lot easier to find. So as Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche has mentioned in Dharma Paths, listing and then ranking your own defilements or your own negative habits is a great way of waking up. It could be kind of a tough practice too, getting to know and inventorying all the work we have to do. If we really want to make that broad altruistic aspiration a reality, we have to work on everything on our list. And so I think it is great advice to take some time and write that stuff down and put it in order, rank it. Number 50, don't be swayed by external circumstances. Although your external circumstances may vary, your practice should not be dependent on that. Whether you are sick or well, rich or poor, have a good reputation or bad reputation, you should practice Lojong. It is very simple. If your situation is right, breathe that out. If your situation is wrong, breathe that in. So I just want to know here that breathing out is, on the one hand, a practice of letting go. But if you're familiar with the practice of tong-len and the visualization that accompanies it, and the meaning, the symbolism, breathing out is a practice of letting go, but it's also a process of letting go so that all sentient beings can enjoy the benefit of whatever goodness you're breathing out. So we talk about breathing out, all the causes of happiness and good karma and good health, and giving that away. And there is a meaningful activity that happens, or a meaningful training of the mind that happens in breathing that out and having that imagery of letting it go. But it is going out to all sentient beings, and you're not excluded from that. You're not. So, there is an imagery of letting it go, but we're letting go of it in service of cultivating an impartial compassion. Similarly, breathing in is on the one hand a practice of taking on negativities and taking on challenge. But when we breathe in, that comes in, it goes down to our heart center and it disappears. So it's also a practice of recognizing the empty nature of those things that we're breathing in, recognizing that those things all exist interdependently, not in the way that we think of things being real or existent. So just recalling that practice includes you, it includes relative means to realize ultimate goals. Then 51, this time practice the main points. This time refers to this lifetime. You have wasted many lives in the past, and in the future you may not have the opportunity to practice. But now as a human being who has heard the Dharma, you do. So without wasting any more time, you should practice the main points. This teaching is threefold. The benefit of others is more important than yourself. Two, practicing the teachings of the guru is more important than analytical study. Three, practicing bodhicitta is more important than other practice. Number 52, don't misinterpret. There are 6 things that you may twist or misinterpret in your practice: patience, yearning, excitement, compassion, priorities, and joy. It is a misinterpretation of patience to be patient about everything in your life but the practice of Dharma. Misinterpreted yearning is to foster yearning for pleasure and wealth, but not to encourage the yearning to practice Dharma thoroughly and properly. Misinterpreted excitement is to get excited by wealth and entertainment, but not to be excited by the study of Dharma. It is a twisted compassion to be compassionate to those who endure hardships in order to practice Dharma, but to be unconcerned and uncompassionate to those who do evil. Twisted priorities means to work diligently out of self-interest at that which benefits you in the world, but not practice Dharma. Twisted joy is to be happy when sorrow afflicts your enemies, but not to rejoice in virtue and in the joy of transcending samsara. You should absolutely and completely stop all 6 of these misinterpretations. Number 53, don't vacillate. You should not vacillate in your enthusiasm for practice. If you sometimes practice and other times do not, that will not give birth to certainty in the Dharma. Therefore, don't think too much. Just concentrate one-pointedly on mind training. I want to comment on this when he says, if you sometimes practice and other times do not, that will not give birth to certainty in the Dharma. So I think there were years where if I heard that, I would have thought about that morning I slept in and didn't do my chanting. And I want to encourage you to really connect with the intention and make the choices that support the intention. I think it's great to get up every day at the same time to do your practice, but we all know that doesn't happen all the time. And sometimes we have to make adjustments. And sometimes we just really need sleep. You know, I had COVID for the 6th time a couple weeks ago. And yeah, I needed to do a lot of sleeping. So, the idea I think with all of this is, if that's really what you need, and you know that because you've taken a moment to be aware of your situation and compassionate with that situation, and you make a choice based on that, connecting it to that broad intention to be of benefit to beings, that's a good thing, and that is practice. So that is not doing the practice. You know, I'm encouraging you, you know, to consider that type of thing practice, as long as you're connecting with the intention and making honest assessments of what action is needed. You're practicing. So, this is also another place where the foundational nature of mindfulness becomes important, because mindfulness really means to recall or to remember. So we need to remember again and again to come back to our practice, because we have habits that we do or not practice. You know, they're usually aimed at building ourselves up, strengthening our view of the world, trying to change the external world to match our expectations. So mindfulness in the sense of remembering, to recalling, to come back to the anchor of our intention is really important. So this refers really to an engaged, embodied practice of Lojong, I think. 54, train wholeheartedly. Trust yourself and your practice wholeheartedly. Train purely in Lojong, simple-mindedly, with no distractions. I just want to repeat, trust yourself and your practice wholeheartedly. 55, liberate yourself by examining and analyzing. Simply look at your mind and analyze it. Doing those 2 things, you should be liberated from kleshas and ego clinging. Then you can practice Lojong. So I think this relates to the first noble truth. You know, we're told that we are to comprehend suffering, understand suffering. And that itself is a practice. I mean, if we don't act out and we instead take a beat to just examine the suffering, to try to understand the suffering that's happening, we've already stamped a klesha. We've already stopped what could be potentially further negative activity from leaking out into the world. So I think this relates, that this examining and analyzing. So Buddhahood is the goal, enlightenment is the goal, but learning to watch the mind is the first step, and maybe the last step too. So making a habit of examining the mind in our internal world counteracts fixation on figuring out the external world, and in particular, figuring out who to blame. So when we can turn to examining our suffering, then we're automatically not thinking about whose fault it is. So I also want to share, I'm reading this great book. I can't remember the author's name, but it's called How Emotions Are Made. And it's all the science that they have around like what emotions are now. And it's really fascinating stuff. And she uses a 2-axis model to talk about emotion, because the whole theory of this book is emotions are constructed. We construct them. They don't just exist. There is no sadness circuit in the brain. If you don't know about an emotion, you can't have it. There are, I can't remember where, but there is some culture that doesn't have a concept of sadness. They just don't have it. It's because they didn't learn it. So what's actually happening is we're having these experiences. We're learning from our culture, from our parents, from the people around us, from social interactions, what to call that. And so this 2-axis model she uses is valence and arousal. So when we talked earlier about hyperarousal, spaced out, or hyper-focused, that's the arousal. So we could have low arousal or high arousal. And if you imagine like a plate, like one axis is low arousal, high arousal. The other one is pleasant affect, unpleasant affect, or feeling tone, to use Buddhist terms. And at any given point, that's the thing we can look for. That's examining and analyzing. If we're in a moment, we're feeling a certain way, and our instinct is to go, oh, here I go, feeling angry again. It's like, no, wait a minute. I'm feeling a slightly unpleasant affect and some high arousal, like immediately we're not jumping in to like naming it and really jumping into our narratives. So like we call this like affect labeling. And I think she calls it affect labeling at the construction site rather than after the house is built. So like the house being built is like anger. When I'm angry, I do this. That's what it is. So if we can, at the construction site, label what's happening in a more realistic way, that's beneficial. That reduces reactivity because we're not engaging with the narratives that we have around our emotions. It keeps us in the state of open inquiry. It keeps us curious and compassionate. And it's super helpful. So it also increases emotional granularity, which is another thing that is associated with greater well-being and a more nuanced understanding of our experience in our internal world. The more words you have for the way you feel, the more likely you are to feel better. And so some of that starts with just, labeling that affect before, instead of throwing a general emotion name on that. So it's like another way to say this is, it's like mindfulness is preconceptual awareness. This is what, the valence, pleasant, unpleasant, arousal, high, low. That's what we get. That's what is, before we get to what does this mean. And it's really important that we know what is before we start to leap to what does this mean. So I would really encourage that as a mindful practice. Getting to the finish line here. Number 56, don't wallow in self-pity. Don't feel sorry for yourself. If somebody else achieves success and inherits $1 million, don't waste time feeling bad because it wasn't you. And this is, again, such a simple slogan, so easily skipped over. And we have to remember that this applies to us, to ourselves. And how can we should know, have ready at hand in our tool belt ways to counteract that sort of self-pity that can come up. Number 57, don't be jealous. If somebody else receives praise and you don't be envious. don't be envious. And I want to clarify here what I believe he means by the word be, like when he says don't be jealous. Um, Relating back to this, affect labeling at the construction site, I would encourage you not to read the slogan as saying like, don't notice that you're feeling jealous. I think it's it's maybe a little bit nuanced, but it's a super important distinction to make. Don't be jealous doesn't mean don't notice yourself when you think you might be feeling jealous. It means practice, Um, First of all, that the jealousy is a construction. It's a label for a set of thoughts and feelings for uh, an arousal and an affect that we believe seems similar and nameable compared to other versions of jealousy we've witnessed or experienced. And we can cut right through that when we notice that it's just a label. It's a label that we just keep habitually applying to totally different but seemingly similar situations, including a seemingly similar self. So, second, one way not to be jealous when we notice what we refer to as jealousy is to refer back to that examine and analysis slogan: liberate by examining and analyzing. Where in our body are we feeling what we're calling jealousy? Can we rest our mind there? Rather than thinking about the jealousy, telling the story of it, fighting against it, maybe trying to push it away or trying to pull it in, just make it into a mindful practice. Can you find it and put your attention there? Number 58, don't be frivolous. Don't demonstrate frivolous jealousy at your friend's success. If an acquaintance is wearing a new tie or a new blouse that you yourself would like, don't capriciously point out its shortcomings to him or her. Yes, it's nice, but it has a stain on it. That will only serve to irritate him and won't help either his or your practice. Number 59, the last slogan: don't expect applause. Don't expect others to praise you or raise toasts to you. Don't count on receiving credit for your good deeds or good practice. And I just want to comment here, like what in the Buddhist arena is the ultimate applause? Buddhahood, enlightenment, right? So we practice Dharma in general and Lojong in particular because that's how things work. It's a smart way to work with how things work. We know we want to be happy. We know others want to be happy. So through the practice of Dharma, we commit to living in accord with what is, with the true natural order of things. We're not doing it for that big applause. Like that is an outcome, but like we shouldn't be waiting for that, all of that recognition and applause. And I'll quote like another one of my favorite Trungpa quotes when he says, "You don't get to be at your enlightenment party." You don't get to be there. It's kind of funny, but it's true. And then we have our concluding verses. And this is the end of Trungpa's book. He concludes with these verses. When the 5 dark ages occur, this is the way to transform them into the path of Bodhi. This is the essence of the Amrita of the oral instructions which were handed down from the tradition of the sage of Suvarnadvipa. Having awakened the karma of previous training and being urged on by intense dedication, I disregarded misfortune and slander and received oral instruction on taming ego fixation. Now, even at death, I will have no regrets. These 2 verses are the concluding comments of Geshe Chikawa Yeshe Dorje, the author of the root text of the 7 points of mind training. We started in March of 2024, working through these items, and I really appreciate getting to take such a deep dive on all of this. And because this is the conclusion of this series, I think this is a good time to conclude my time teaching Dharma in this type of Tibetan Buddhist setting. So I want to thank you all. This is going to be the last night I do it for a while. I am still active in my nonprofit, and I will be teaching Dharma and trying to help beings towards awakening for the rest of my life. But I have become very aware. Oh, there goes my lights. Hey Siri, lights working. But I've become very aware that I am moving further and further away from the institutional norms of Tibetan Buddhism, and that's just the way it is. And I'm good with that. So I'm open for questions. I have time. Sorry, I took us right to the hour.
So Lama Adam, are you telling us that this is our last Thursday night with you?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to process.
It makes
that.
me sad.
Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
I know
There's
we'll
lots of
miss
reasons
you.
where I would like to stay, and they're all you guys. It's all
Yeah.
wanting to be with you all, but you know, yeah, I could say all the reasons, but it really just comes down to the fact that like this is on the edge of what I do now, you know, and I find myself feeling inauthentic sometimes, you know, performing Tibetan stuff, you know. I'm trying to find a way. I'm still Karma Kagyu. I will be for as long as I can imagine, but I'm trying to find the American Karma Kagyu.
Interesting. Well, we'll definitely follow you out there. And maybe when you
Definitely.
find some of it, you'll find your way back to us here or there to give us an update. Not
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
yeah,
There are, I mean, I teach through the nonprofit, and you know, if
yeah.
there are things that I offer through the nonprofit that are of use to anybody here or to KTC
Yeah.
SoCal, you know, I'd always be happy, overjoyed to come back or to work with anyone. Yeah, it's a tough choice, tough decision, but I've been thinking about it for a long time.
Understandable. No, we've really enjoyed, I know I as well as many of us, we always look forward to our Thursday nights with you.
I know. Really did.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I started here when I was like, you know, sort of baby Lama, and also going through a lot of baby Lama drama during that time period too. So yeah, and things have you know, it's funny, like I just started door dashing 2 weeks ago. And I love it. I love it. It's so awesome to just drive around different places, bring people food. It's great. So like and I'm still obviously working with a nonprofit too, but that's like a small business, and it's been a struggle. These last 5 years have been a real struggle, and part of why, I mean, well, the reason why I started Mindfulness for Life is to try to find a way to make teaching Dharma in America sustainable, and it has not been financially sustainable for me at all. And I can't keep struggling. You know, I have family, I have an aging mom. You know, I've got to start to turn towards the things that that make me a better person to care for my family and myself, you know, so that I can achieve those broader altruistic goals.
Definitely. Definitely.
Mhm.
I think Kira's looking, can you type in your website into the chat so anybody can
Yeah,
find you there?
you can do either. I'm going to put the nonprofit address in there, but I'm also adam@lamaadam.com.
Perfect. So there, everybody has it. And
Actually, I was wondering if you have an email address.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, thank
You
you.
see? Yeah, you're welcome.
that's how we can find you.
Yeah, and the big thing I'm doing with Mindfulness for Life right now is, you know, I've been developing this mindfulness-based moral injury program, and I was, you know, at the beginning of the summer, I think June, whenever all this insanity with the ICE stuff started, I was like, all right, I got a thing I can do now. I can help people who are helping immigrants. And that's what we're trying to do. And I'm still, you know, we urgently need funding to do it, but I'm already working with a couple people who support immigrant and refugee communities. And I'm just really happy that I have you know, I wish it was bigger and more, you know, financially sustainable at this point, but it's kind of neat to be a small organization because we're nimble. And I was able to just quickly go, all right, this is what we're going to do now, you know, and it's a thing I care
That's
about.
awesome.
And, yeah.
I mean, this is really crimes against humanity.
Well, we can do what we can to help people. And so any questions before we wrap up for tonight?
No, I think that was really, I think it was really great to wrap up with, as we did this evening, and for you to wrap up with us. And I just have
Mhm.
one suggestion, because I know one or two Dharma brothers or sisters out there who are studying law and might not be a specific lawyer, but I know one, I'll give him your information. My Dharma brother, he's been to some events, we used to log in, Eric, and he's moving up Washington way. But tell him what you're doing and maybe put out some feelers that way.
Yeah. One of the
Mhm.
people I'm working with is somebody who's a lawyer for refugee cases. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I know they're very busy
Awesome.
right now. Yeah.
I'll text him in a moment.
Oh, thank you. Well, let me put up the dedication,
Okay.
and again, thank you all. It's not the last time I'll see you. I'll be around.
No,
pop
yeah,
in
come
for
join.
Chen Razik or something sometime.
We'll come reach
Um,
out here or there.
Yeah,
Mm.
and we, there's a
When you're
membership
done
service
with
through
us,
the Mindfulness for Life, the Anchor Club, and I do programs there. Doing programs there. I'm doing exclusive teachings on there. So
Yeah,
there's ways to find me still.
yeah. Okay.
All right, so let's chant these two dedication prayers, these two verses, recalling and tying this together with the idea of aspiration and intention. Bodhicitta, ultimate and relative truth. We have this relative aspect first, and then we close with the ultimate aspect. In the first stanza here, we're talking about things from a relative perspective. And then in the last one, we're connecting with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, enlightened beings, and asking them to help us accomplish what they have and to help us do what we're doing with what they know. By this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may we free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and also all the Bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. All right. Thank you all.
Be well, Lama Adam.
Be well.
Emaha.
Best of luck. Take
See you
care.
on the other
Thank you.
thank you, Lama Adam.
Bye, everybody.
side.